Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Year 11 revision evening. I'm Karen Hudson, and I'm here to talk about science. So, I'm sure you already know this, but all our GCSEs are done through the exam board AQA. If you are looking for anything online, that is your go-to search, that you're looking for GCSE AQA. We offer 4 different qualifications on 2 different pathways. You will need to know which pathway your child is on, and that is dictated by what group they are in this year. Your child will know, but just in case you want to double check, if they are in 11X1 or 11Y1, then they are on what we call the triple pathway, and they are doing separate GCSEs in biology, chemistry, and physics. They have to do 6 papers. Each paper is 1 hour and 45 minutes, 2 biology, 2 chemistry, and 2 physics. There is no coursework. If they are in any other year group, any other science group, then they are doing a double GCSE, and we call that pathway the combined science or the double award science pathway. They still do 6 papers, but they are only 1 hour and 15 minutes long. You can see on your screen now the summer exam dates, but those will be on your child's exam timetable anyway. The reason that I put them up is that they're almost all in the morning, with one exception. The physics paper 1 on the 9th of June is an afternoon paper. It's just worth noting. They shouldn't assume that because all their other papers are in the morning, that all the papers are in the morning. Now, one of the more contentious bits that we do are the tiers of entry, and those have pretty much been decided based on everything your child has done since the start of year 9 when they started their GCSEs. However, there are a small handful of children who are in the mocks that are starting on the 14th of March. They are doing higher tier for their mocks because they haven't quite showed enough level 6s yet. So any child with 2 or more level 6s, we automatically said, do you want to do higher tier? They either said yes or they said no. Most said yes. However, if they've only got 1 6, it seems unfair to then not give them one last chance. So their last chance is on the 14th of March in those mocks. If they can get another 6, we will move them up to higher tier. If they can't get another grade 6, then we leave them where they are on foundation tier. Please note that there is no mixed tiering. If they do higher tier, they do all 6 papers on higher tier. And if they do foundation tier, they do all 6 papers on foundation tier. In terms of what the papers enclose, there is a tiny little bit of extra work on higher tier that isn't present on foundation tier. But generally speaking, foundation tier is simpler. It is more knowledge recall. There is still application, but more knowledge recall, whereas higher tier requires more insight and better extended writing and maths skills, as well as there being a little bit of extra work too. In order to get into any science A-level here at St. Peter's, and as well as into subjects like psychology, students will need to get at least a grade 6 in their relevant science or a 6/6 in combined science. So in order to get that grade 6, they need to be doing higher tiers in the final exam. And in order to be put into high tier for the final exam, they need to have been getting 6s in their tests so far. So just so that you know, to get into A-levels. Now, as tonight is a revision evening, I want to spend most of the time talking about revision. And the question that I often get asked is, how much revision should they do? It's very variable. I guess a bit like diets, some people things come easily to and they don't have to do much revision and they get great grades. Whereas for other children, it doesn't come so easy and they have to do a little bit more revision to get the same grade as their friend. So in order to judge it, if you quiz them on what do these words mean and you just ask them the bold words in their textbooks, if they can tell you what those words mean without stumbling and stuttering, that's a good start. If they try some past paper questions and they are getting sort of 50, 60, 70% for a grade 4, 5, 6 respectively, then I would argue that they've probably done enough. As an absolutely horrific generalization, may I suggest that 4 hours not including school time, per paper would be a good start to revision. But if they start now, they could do easily 10 hours per paper by the time they get to their final exam. Start sooner. What you can do to help, to a large extent, you just have to set it up for them so that they can revise. And then I know some teachers say you shouldn't check up on your child. I have a year 10 son. I would check up. Providing a suitable study space, take away distractions. Phones are a little bit tricky if they use them to get into Caboodle or they use them to get their past paper questions. But you can check their browsing history. You can see what they've been on. You can look up what they've been doing. Help them to set up a revision schedule. Use an Excel spreadsheet. Work out between now and the exams. These are all the dates available. How can I possibly fit in all the topics I have to do? Type the slot the top topics in to an Excel spreadsheet so that they at least cover everything once. Maybe set some timers for them so that you can say when the cooker alarm goes off because the roast potatoes have been in for 45 minutes, then you'll have done enough time. Do quiz them on their keywords. If they've been doing revision flashcards, ask them to leave the flashcards on the dining room table. And as you sit and have once you've finished your meal, so as not to spoil the meal, ask them a couple of questions, a couple of words after each meal. If you have a long car journey in, ask them to bring the cards into the car with you and say to them they need to read you, because you'd be driving, what the word is, and then they have to tell you what the meaning is. Also, if they do past papers, please help them to do the marking. Children are very generous when they mark their own work, and they will give themselves their mark based on, but that's what I meant. So if you read it, you are more dispassionate, you are more objective when you are marking. Also, be their student, let them teach you. If you say, what have you been revising? And they say, I've been learning about stem cells, say to them, so tell me about stem cells. I don't know what a stem cell is, tell me about stem cells. You will have heard, I think, about something called advanced material, and that is something that the exam boards have brought out in order to try and offset the effect of the lockdowns on this particular cohort. So they gave us lists of which little subtopics are a big part of the exam and which little subtopics are not part of the exam at all. So there are sheets saved on your child's science team, which show exactly what pages in the textbook they can leave out. Sometimes it's not always super clear because half the page you can leave out, but half you've got to know, but we've been as clear as we can. Essentially, they do have to revise everything else that they can't leave out. However, the advanced material did highlight certain main topics. So once they've revised everything, it would then be a good idea to go over those main topics again. They are also on that list. If they're working from a textbook and they're doing combined science, higher tier, they should leave out any pages marked GCSE biology or chemistry or physics in the top left-hand corner, because that is for triple only. And if they're doing combined science foundation tier, not only do they leave out those pages that I've just mentioned, but also the ones marked higher tier. Now, a little bit about revision techniques, and this is not science specific. I would imagine that these techniques are true for many other subjects. The most popular revision technique that children will tell you they use is, I've read the textbook. It's also the least useful one they can do. Obviously, you have to read, but you should be reading the textbook in order to do something else with it, not reading as the point of the revision. If you see your child just sitting with a book in front of them, reading it, tell them to do something more active. They are taught more active revision techniques, but they will always insist that they've never been taught how to revise. Mostly what they mean is, I have been taught how to revise, but I don't like those techniques, so I'm not going to use them. The next one they love doing, and this tends to be a lot of the girls like doing this, they write out their notes. And again, it's not that it's useless, much like I guess when you make a shopping list, it's not useless. If you forget your list, at least you remember something. But if they're not doing it from memory, then it's just a copying exercise, and it's of very limited value. The first thing that I would suggest is get a handle on what you're good at and what you're not good at. And the best way to do that is to use something called checklists. So if they go into Caboodle and they click on the resources tab and they type in checklists, so if they're studying B2, you can type in B2 checklist, and it will look a bit like that, and it will tell them what they need to know depending on what grade they're aiming for. There is a checklist per chapter in the textbook. That should give them a really good idea of, actually, I'm very good at this. I'm going to spend 20 minutes on it and move on, versus, yeah, I have no idea what this is about. I need to spend a good hour, hour and a half on this. Another fairly basic but good one is keyword cards. So especially in biology, but also for the equations in physics, although they are getting an equation sheet this year. Word on the front, meaning on the back, and they have to learn them. If they were doing their homeworks from years 9 to year 10, and even into year 11, they actually should already have a keyword card for every single keyword in the entire course. If they don't, back onto Caboodle, resources, type in glossary, and you can get a chapter by chapter list of all the keywords that they have to know the meanings of. Now, I found a lovely quote that said that memory is the residue of thought. So if you want to remember something, you actually have to think about it. And if you were reading something in the textbook and you can convert those facts into something like a mind map, then you've thought about it. And that's otherwise known as change of format. You see a graph in your textbook. Can you write notes in bullet points? You see bullet points in your textbook. Can you convert that into a flow chart? All right, so any kind of change of format requires thought. And if you think about something, you stand a much better chance of remembering it. So other techniques that are also good is teaching out loud. If they have to sit on their bed with a teddy bear and teach the teddy bear all about transport in plants, that's fine, because they will find themselves getting more fluent because you sound silly, stuttering and stumbling over what you're trying to say, even if you're only talking to a teddy bear. Failing a teddy bear, they can always teach a friend or a parent. Mnemonics are really good. Come up with little phrases to help you remember orders. I think famously the planets is my very easy method, just speeds up naming planets. One letter gives you the first letter of each of the planets, but there are more too. Things like mind palaces. If you have to remember a list of things, you mentally put the things you've got to remember in different rooms of your house. And then you imagine yourself walking through those rooms, and that triggers the memory of the item or the thing that you've mentally hidden in that room. Telling yourself stories also helps. So famously, they have to learn 5 different things that plants can do with their glucose, and they can learn a little story about, well, there was this boy and he was running and he hit a wall, because 2 of the things are aerobic respiration and cell walls. And just to help you remember the 6 things. If you can remember the little story, it helps. The most valuable revision techniques they can do is doing past paper questions. And even if they've done every past paper, they can get their grubby paws on. Once they've marked it, give it another week and try the questions again. It is quite scary that, and we do it too, adults and children do it. You will get the same question again. You will remember that you got it wrong last time. You will remember what you wrote that was wrong, but you still don't know the right answer, so you write the wrong one again. Because there's something, we just don't want to write down nothing. So keep practicing past papers. They are incredibly, incredibly valuable. Then a little word of caution about web-based revision. It is like drinking from a fire hose. There is so much out there, and if they go onto the wrong websites, they could spend hours and hours and hours learning stuff that they don't even have to know because it's not their exam board. So be very, very careful with children who just want to do online revision, online revision, online revision. Right? It doesn't always test what they need to know. They have to know what exam board they do. They have to know what specification they are. There's one called chemguide.co.uk, which is very good for explaining concepts. There's one called Khan Academy, which is very good. The addresses are on screen. And watching YouTube clips, as I say, they can be good, but it is very passive. And it should be a case of, I don't understand resistance in a wire, so I've watched just this little clip on resistance in a wire. It should absolutely not be their main method. It's too passive. There's too little thinking, and then that residue of thought isn't there. Some revision resources, they can use their revision guides. They have access to the electronic books on Caboodle. They can use their class notebook, although that is more really just thoughts as you're working. Their PATs that they've done, have a look at them, see what questions they got wrong. Can they now look at those questions and think, oh, I know that now. Why did I write that stupid answer on the day that we did it? Or they're still looking at them and thinking, yeah, I still don't know what that answer is. Right? They should be able to do those PATs much more easily now. And then obviously they can get workbooks and flashcards and all sorts of other revision resources. You can buy them online. I gave out an opportunity last year to buy through school because it's nearly half price if you buy through school. And there is currently another opportunity to buy available through school. Your window shuts on Friday. So go on to Parent Pay. There are 3 potentials and your child will be able to tell you whether they are triple, higher tier or foundation tier when you're buying a bundle. If it's not ordered by Friday, then you have to buy it yourself through the internet. They can use Caboodle. There is so much on Caboodle. The information is there on the screen. There is the address, how to log in. We've been using Caboodle through all the lockdowns. If your child still can't get onto Caboodle, I would be incredibly worried about what have they been doing through the lockdowns? How have they been doing their homeworks for the last 6 months, 4 months that we've been back at school? Then using the teachers. Children love to sit in front of me and write out their notes and make their mind maps. But then I'm just watching a child do pretty things, and that's a little bit pointless. Do all that at home. Do in class what you cannot do at home. If you get stuck on a question at home, who are you going to ask for help? Whereas if you get stuck on a question in class, you've got the teacher that you can ask for help. There is a phrase I coined called hedgehog revision. If they've got a book or a textbook or a notebook or even flashcards, put little post-it notes, and you put one post-it, a second, a third, a fourth, every time you've got a query, so that it ends up looking a bit like a hedgehog with all the post-it notes sticking out the side. Then you come to class, and when I say, okay, everybody, get on with your revision, you can put your hand up, call the teacher up and say, right, miss, on page 23, and they open the book. I got this, but I don't get this. All right? And it makes it really easy to help you. If a child comes in and says, I'm stuck on what? Science. There is nothing that the teacher can do with that. We cannot fix 11 years of science. We need to know specifically, and no child knows nothing. They might say they know nothing, but they do. They do know stuff. If they want help with specific concepts that are proving tricky, there are the lunchtime sessions, although I, for example, can't do a Wednesday lunch, and I'm more than happy to help children on a Tuesday. Once they've done a past paper, come to the teacher and say, I've done this past paper and I don't like, the mark scheme says this, but I can't understand why that's the answer. Please, can you explain it? Okay. We are currently not planning on doing any weekend or holiday sessions. So if the children don't use these lunchtime sessions, we're not putting on weekend and holiday sessions later. That is just for your reference. If you're still thinking old money of A stars and A's and B's, that is a little bit of a comparison with what the new grades. They're not actually that new anymore, but because as parents, most of us did the old letters, not numbers, you might want a bit of a comparison. Then what are the kind of questions in the exams? If they're very lucky, there will be a couple of knowledge recall questions, like that sort of thing there. You just have to fill in the gaps. It's spew back of knowledge. But there won't be, that definitely won't be the whole paper. Then we go on to, push the wrong button, application questions. So they will be given a bit of a preamble, like the bit over there about antibiotics in food production. And we are not required to teach them about antibiotics in food production, but we are required to teach them about antibiotic resistance. So what this question does is it asks about antibiotic resistance in the context of food production. And actually, when you look at that question, the question is really a question about evolution. So they need to apply the knowledge of evolution to antibiotic resistance rather than the evolution of a giraffe's long neck, for example. There are data response questions, and those obviously we can't teach them the answers. All we can do is teach them the techniques where you have to read the column headings very carefully. You have to look at the units very carefully, and then you have to work things out from the tables and the graphs. They get evaluation type questions, and they have to know that evaluation questions require you to talk about pros and cons, arguments for, arguments against, and come to a conclusion. So they have to weigh up the pros and the cons, and in their opinion, is this a good thing or a bad thing? All things taken into account. There will also be some questions about how science works, and that mostly involves identifying variables, identifying sources of uncertainty, and identifying the reasons why we do certain steps in any given experiment. Finally, if you've got any queries, if you would please, in the first instance, contact your child's relevant science teacher. So if you've got a biology query, the biology teacher, chemistry query, the chemistry teacher, a physics query, the physics teacher. If you email info@stpeters.bournemouth.sch.uk and into the subject line, if you type in "for the attention of" and then the relevant teacher's name, it will be forwarded on to them. If the relevant teacher turns out they're not helping you with your query, do please then feel free to send an email to the same address with my name in the subject line. If the query comes to me about a child that I don't teach, I will simply forward it on to the teacher anyway. So I hope you have a good evening, and congratulations if you made it all the way this far into the presentation. I hope you found it helpful. Thank you. Now I have to figure out how to stop the recording.